Hello there. What I have here is a Sheaffer WASP, William A. W.A. Sheaffer pen. It's a pen that was made by Sheaffer to be sold at cheaper prices, and they just came up with a name to call it instead of putting their name on it. They kind of did a tricky little thing and said WASP, W.A. Sheaffer pen, and that sometimes when this pen was being produced, it was associated with Sheaffer, and sometimes it was not. It just depended on the year and what Sheaffer decided to do with it and all. Anyway, the nib is soaking. It's been soaking for like 2 days because you can't pull it apart. It screws in and out, but they were made, from what I understand, with interchangeable nibs. You could screw one out, put one back in, that kind of deal. But anyway, what I'm doing right now is this is the beginnings of restoration. Now I had what I've done is I've masked certain parts of this pen. You can't see it, but this is black electrical tape, and it's covering the inscription that says WASP, and probably a couple other things. I've also masked the lever because it's a lever fill. I've masked the gold band around the cap, and I've masked the gold clip. Now, what this is what's known as a J-bar, and it goes up inside the barrel of the pen, and this lines up with the lever, and when you put the sack in the pen and you lift the lever, it pushes this metal against the sack and compresses it, and it sucks in ink. That's how the mechanism works. The reason it's out of the pen is because there was an old sack. This is part of what's left of it. I saved it for this video. That had ossified and turned hard and brittle up inside here, and it had jammed in between this and the lever of the pen, and it was just ugly. And I actually dug and dug and dug with several different kinds of tools. Still couldn't get it all out. I ended up having to soak this section in water for several hours, and finally what happened was the sack just fell out in pieces along with this, and this will go back in the pen to make it operate again. But now if you look at this pen, I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's got some scratches all along the barrel, or all along the cap here. It's got some scratches all along in here. Matter of fact, I want to look close at it again with a loupe. But I mean, I've restored vintage guitars, vintage straight razors, vintage single edge razors, that kind of deal. And I can tell you that this right here, these scratches are so thin that 4/0, and you can see on this side I've already started, but 4/0 steel wool will pretty much take those scratches out. Now, one of the things you want to be careful with these pens, and the reason I know that, these pens, some of them were made from celluloid. It's an old, for lack of a better term, an old kind of petroleum-based plastic. And celluloid, among one of its among many of its interesting properties, is flammable as all get out. So you have to be careful when you're sanding on it not to build up a lot of heat, because it can and will ignite on your sorry little butt if you're not careful. And I could go with like 2000 grit sandpaper and follow up with steel wool, or I could go with micro mesh, different levels of micro mesh, that kind of deal. But I know without any kind of doubt that this steel wool for this pen is pretty much all that's needed to get all the scratches out of this pen and make it ready to be polished out and restored. Now I've got the gold colored parts, the inscription on the barrel, that kind of deal covered up, partly because I don't want to take this steel wool and scratch it all up or rub it out, because trust me, I can take this steel wool and that engraving, it'll take it out. You might say, I don't believe that, but I can tell you right now, through experience, doing this kind of work with celluloid and plastics and stuff like that on vintage instruments, that it can and will, a good polish, a proper polish, can get rid of some engravings on plastics. It just can. And what I'm going to do, I've got, looking at the barrel, and I see just a little bit of a scratch left there, and we're going to take care of that. But once I get it now, I'm not graceful. I will tell you right ahead of time that although I'm doing it a little different, in other words, mainly starting with this steel wool instead of using things like micro mesh and sandpaper and all that, pretty much everything that I'm doing here, or that I'll be doing to try to restore this pen, came from watching other people here on YouTube repair fountain pens, period. So I'm not doing anything unique to me. I've taken and modified their technique to be able to be, and what I'm going to do, beautiful art. That right there is beautiful. There's not a scratch left on it anywhere, and it will buff up to a wonderful high polish, I do believe. And what I was saying was, I've just adapted techniques that I learned from other people here on YouTube, and you got to be careful, because this will even destroy those threads if you don't watch what you're doing. You can say, well, Mike, that's just 4/0 steel wool. Well, let me explain something to you. I know what it is, and it will do what I'm telling you it'll do. But it's safer, in my opinion, than going at it with sandpaper and that kind of deal. At least to start. Now, if you start with a steel wool, my philosophy when I try to restore anything, whether it's these pins now that I'm enjoying restoring, or 100 or 70 or 80-year-old guitar, or 100-year-old straight razor, or any other thing, is to start with what would be the least destructive thing to restore with. And if that don't do what you're wanting it to do, then you can move to more aggressive techniques. But I can tell you right now, looking at this pin, turning it in the light, that this is doing the job. Oh, one other little tip. You see all this here? That's the steel wool. In case you don't know, steel wool is also highly flammable. That would ignite so fast you would not even believe it. So all of this stuff here in my house, I'm going to make darn sure, to the best of my ability, I get all this up so that I can at least minimize any kind of danger of a fire or any such thing in my home. But I mean, these are really cool. I'm going to enjoy, I think, restoring these pins. This pin, and I should be having some more show up here soon. Beautiful. And if you just turn it in the light, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a little speck there, which is a little nick, very tiny pinprick of a nick in the pin. I want that gone. But just turning it in the light, looking at it, and typically more of the scratches and stuff are going to be here where it's posted, or along the cap here. And I'm just going back over and looking for any kind of, see this steel wool turns the pin matte. And one of the ways that you can find sections that is like, there's a scratch. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's shiny, and the rest of this section is dull. So I can see it very well if I turn it in the light, and the steel wool doesn't heat the pin up as much either. I mean, I'm sure that if I stayed in one spot, rubbed hard enough and long enough, it would heat up the pin. But it takes a lot more to do it. And as a beginner, like I said, a little bit at a time, or I'm sorry, as least aggressively as I can be. That's beautiful. Let's see that's beautiful. But I'm just going over the pin until I am satisfied when I turn it in the light that there aren't any scratches left on this pin. Now, run along the barrel. Now what I may have to do is come along and replace all this tape, because you can see it's kind of trying to pull up a little and stuff like that. When I start polishing this pin, I don't want it. Is that a scratch? Yes. I don't want it pulling up because I don't want that polish. The lever, the clip, the little band here that's gold, this is the gold plate. And to be quite honest with you, most polish will take that gold plate right off of them. And so you want to cover it all up. I don't want any of it getting up underneath here. So that's good right there. I can't turn it anywhere. See any scratches, nicks, anything of the sort. Well, there's one spot. You just keep looking. But that's easy to deal with. Alright, there we go. Beautiful. That will polish out wonderfully, and I will show you that. I don't know if I will actually show you polishing the pen. Show you me polishing the pen. Excuse me a minute. Because I can't do it indoors. Because the polish stinks and my wife goes crazy. But that right there, that's what I'll use. And it'll be beautiful. You see these guys, I've seen these guys using a micro mesh and going to 25,000 or 12,000 or whatever. If you want to do that, that's good, but I can promise you right now, you're going to find out, you're going to see that it's not necessary. This steel wool will shine it up, make it beautiful. or it'll flatten everything and get all the scratches and everything out of it, and that mothers will bring it to a wonderful polish. So alright, I'll be back with a polished pen or with a tutorial on polishing. Basically it's the same thing I did with these, except I'm spreading polish on it instead of using this to take scratches out. But if I can work it, I'll show that. If not, I'll show you the finished product, and then we'll talk about resacking it, putting this J-bar back in it, that kind of deal. Alright, God bless you. I hope you enjoyed that and it wasn't too much of a rambling kind of thing. Later. Alright, I'm back. Here's the final finish of the pen. This is the pen body. Finished. I think it turned out really nice. I used that to polish the gold parts. And what we're going to do now, take it apart. I'll polish the nib with that as well. We're going to take the pen apart. We're just going to take the nib out and section out of it. Lay that down. And we're going to take our J-bar. And no, I've never done this before. But I'm going to insert that in there. We're going to take this, well, if this will go in there, it won't. I'm prepared for that. We're going to take this screwdriver. I'm going to go down in there. We're going to push it all the way down in. Beautiful. And there you have the completed pen with J-bar installed. My sack should be here soon, at which point there'll be another video where we put a sack on this pen and write with it. Bless you. Thank you for following along, and hope that has helped you and encouraged you to restore some of those fountain pens that you've got laying around. Later.